Have you ever sat in a room full of people, maybe even family, and felt like you were fading into the background? Like your voice didn't carry the same weight it once did, or your presence went unnoticed? It's a strange, quiet kind of ache. You're still here. You're still you. But somehow, the world feels like it's looking right through you. If you've felt that way lately, please know that you're not alone. And more importantly, there's nothing wrong with you. This isn't about being too sensitive or needing attention. It's about something deeper. A human need we all share, no matter our age. The need to be seen. Not just looked at, but really seen. Heard. Valued. As we get older, it's easy for that feeling of invisibility to creep in. Children grow up and move on with their lives. Friends may drift away. The phone doesn't ring as often. Even when you're surrounded by others, there can be a heavy silence, as if your place in the world has quietly shifted and nobody told you. That shift is what we're here to talk about today. So, let's talk, heart to heart, about why this feeling of being invisible happens, and more importantly, how to gently step back into the light of your own life. Because you deserve to feel seen, and that begins with how you see yourself. One of the first reasons many people start to feel invisible is because they've spent so much of their lives showing up for others. You may have spent decades as a caregiver, a parent, a partner, a reliable neighbor, or a tireless volunteer. And somewhere along the way, your own needs, dreams, and identity quietly got tucked away. You became the support beam in everyone else's life, and what a beautiful thing that is. But it can also make it easy for others to forget that you're not just the role you played. You're a whole person with layers, history, stories, and wisdom. When we stop reminding people of that, when we stop reminding ourselves, that's when invisibility can begin to take root. So let me ask you this. When was the last time you truly checked in with you? Not the version of you that people expect, but the real, raw, human version of you. What brings you joy now? Not 30 years ago, not what made others happy, but now. If that question feels hard to answer, that's okay. It just means it's time to reconnect. Sometimes feeling invisible doesn't come from the outside at all, it starts inside. Maybe you've started to believe that your best years are behind you, that you've said all you needed to say, done all you needed to do, and now you're just coasting. That belief can become a quiet script in your mind. Don't speak up. They won't listen. Don't share your ideas. They don't matter. Don't reach out. You'll just be a bother. But here's the truth, spoken as clearly as I can. You still matter. Your voice matters. Your experiences matter. Not because of what you can do for others, but because of who you are. Let's take a moment and talk about childhood. Not because we're trying to relive the past, but because the stories we were told or shown when we were young can echo for a lifetime. If you grew up in a home where your feelings were dismissed, or where you were praised only when you were helpful or quiet or didn't make waves, then it makes perfect sense that you learn to stay small, to keep the peace, to go unnoticed. And if you've carried that pattern into adulthood, you might find yourself still slipping into the shadows even when part of you is longing to be seen. And then there's another layer, one many people over 60 know all too well, the cultural silence around aging. Society has a way of praising youth and speed, productivity and hustle. But what about wisdom? What about kindness that took a lifetime to develop? What about the quiet strength that comes from surviving heartache and still choosing to love? These things aren't valued loudly in modern life, but that doesn't mean they're not valuable. Sometimes the world is just looking in the wrong direction. That's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of its blindness. If you've ever felt overlooked, not just in daily conversation, but in your deepest relationships, especially with adult children or younger family, it can hurt in a way words barely capture. Maybe they're wrapped up in their busy lives, not realizing how long it's been since they asked how you are. Maybe they only call when they need something. And every time it happens, that invisible feeling settles in a little deeper. But before we let that feeling take over, I want to offer you something gentle and powerful. Your presence is not dependent on how others react to you. Your visibility begins when you start seeing yourself again. And that starts with something simple, yet profound. Begin showing up for yourself. Wake up in the morning and ask, what do I need today? Maybe it's a quiet walk, a phone call with someone who truly listens, or even just 10 minutes of sitting in the sun with a good book. Maybe it's finally writing that letter you've been holding in your heart. Maybe it's saying no to something that drains you or yes to something that scares you just a little. Whatever it is, honor it. When you start honoring your own presence, others will begin to notice too. Not because you're demanding attention, but because you're radiating a quiet certainty that you matter. And that kind of energy is impossible to ignore. There's a story I heard once about a woman who, after her husband passed, realized how many parts of herself she had tucked away for years. She started painting again, just in her garage, nothing fancy. But that little act of creativity lit a spark in her. Before long, neighbors would stop by to see what she was working on. Her kids began to call more, curious about this new chapter she'd opened. She didn't become visible by trying to be impressive. She became visible by becoming herself again. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be someone you're not. You just need to start stepping out of the corners you've been placed in, or put yourself in, and into the center of your life. You are not here to fade quietly. You are here to shine in the way that only someone who has lived fully can. And no matter how long it's been since you felt seen, you can always begin again. Let's keep going. There's more to explore. Now that we've opened the door to seeing ourselves again, it's time to look at how we relate to the world around us. Because while your visibility starts within, it also blossoms in connection. With people, with purpose, and with the little moments that make life meaningful again. Let's begin with something many people over 60 wrestle with quietly: the changing roles in relationships. Maybe you've been the dependable one, the glue in your family, the caretaker, the one people turn to when life got messy. And then suddenly, that need seems to vanish. The calls slow down. The visits become less frequent. Your advice isn't asked for like it used to be. And it's disorienting. You begin to wonder, do they not value me anymore? Have I become irrelevant? But here's the truth. Your worth was never about being needed. It was never about doing or fixing or giving. It was always about being you. And just because the dynamics around you have changed doesn't mean your presence holds any less meaning. That said, it's okay to grieve the loss of those old roles. They were important. They were a big part of your identity. But when something ends, it creates space for something new. And now you have an opportunity to redefine what connection looks like on your terms. Sometimes that means having courageous conversations. Not dramatic ones, not confrontational ones, just honest, heartfelt moments where you share what you've been feeling. That might be as simple as saying, I miss hearing your voice. It means a lot when you check in. Or, I'd love to spend some time with you, not because something's wrong, but just to be together. You don't have to beg for time or attention. You're inviting people back into your life in a gentle, dignified way. And sometimes, this is hard but necessary, sometimes it means accepting that some people may not show up the way you hoped. Not because you aren't worth it, but because they may not know how. They might be caught up in their own struggles or not realize how much their absence impacts you. That doesn't mean you should disappear quietly. It means you get to make a choice, to invest your heart where it is seen and nurtured. This brings me to something surprisingly powerful: finding new connections in unexpected places. Maybe your longtime circle has shrunk. Maybe the people who once filled your days are no longer around. But here's the good news. Connection doesn't expire with age. In fact, Some of the richest friendships and most authentic conversations happen later in life, when pretense falls away and realness matters more than ever. I've seen people form deep bonds through a simple shared walk in the park, through a book club that started with just two people, or through volunteering once a week at a place that aligns with their values. When you show up somewhere with your full self, not needing to prove anything, just open to being, you'd be surprised how often others meet you there. There's something magnetic about authenticity. And when you stop hiding the parts of you that feel bruised or overlooked, and instead offer them with tenderness, people respond. That's how community grows. Not by trying to impress, but by showing up as you are and making room for others to do the same. Now let's talk about something that lives closer to the surface but carries deep weight: how we talk to ourselves. Because you could be surrounded by people, loved by them even, and still feel invisible if your inner dialogue constantly tells you that you don't matter anymore. Maybe you've caught yourself thinking, "I'm just in the way," or "No one really wants to hear what I have to say." Maybe when someone forgets to invite you, your first thought is, "Of course they did. I don't count." These thoughts may sound small, but they're powerful. They form the lens through which you see the world and yourself. It's time to change the lens. Instead of waiting for others to see you, start by speaking to yourself as someone worthy of attention. Because you are. Start with a whisper if that's all you can manage. Something as simple as, "I am here. I still matter. I deserve kindness, especially from myself." It might feel awkward at first, but just like any habit, the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. The way you speak to yourself can either pull you deeper into the shadows or gently lead you back into the light. Choose words that open the curtains, not close them. Another powerful shift? Begin doing things that affirm your visibility to you. That could mean dressing in a way that makes you feel vibrant, not invisible. It could mean pursuing something you've always wanted to try: singing, painting, dancing, gardening, storytelling, even just taking long, reflective walks. These aren't small things. They're acts of reclaiming space in your own life. They're ways of saying, "I'm not done yet. There's still so much of me to discover." I once spoke with a man who picked up photography in his 70s. Not to be a professional, not to get followers online, but because he wanted to notice the world again. He said, "When I hold that camera, I'm not invisible. I'm looking for beauty, and somehow I become part of it." Isn't that what we all long for? To feel like we belong to something, to someone, even just to a moment. You see, invisibility doesn't vanish overnight, but it does begin to fade when you make choices that honor your existence. When you stop apologizing for taking up space, when you stop measuring your value by how much you give away, when you let yourself be seen, first by you, then slowly by others. And the most beautiful thing? As you begin to reclaim that visibility, you also start to see others more clearly. People who've been overlooked. People who are holding in their own stories, waiting for someone to ask. And that's when your light becomes more than a personal healing. It becomes a guiding presence for others. You don't have to be anyone but yourself. You don't have to fix the world or even your whole life all at once. Just begin, today, right now, with one small act of recognition. Look in the mirror and say, "I see you." You're still here, and you matter. Let's keep going. There's more to uncover together. There's something else we need to talk about, something that doesn't get said enough but sits quietly in the hearts of so many. The ache of feeling forgotten. Not just ignored in a moment, but slowly, over time, like the world kept moving and somehow left you behind. Birthdays pass with fewer calls. Holidays feel quieter. The people who once knew every little thing about you now only know the outline. It's a kind of grief that doesn't always have a name. And yet, it's real. So, if you've been carrying that silence, that hollow space of being remembered less and less, let me say this to you with all the tenderness I can. You are not forgotten. Not by your story, not by your worth, not by the part of life that still longs for you to show up fully. The world may move fast, but that doesn't mean you've lost your place in it. Your presence still ripples out, sometimes in ways you may never fully see. And here's the thing, you don't need a crowd to be seen. You just need the right people. Even one person who hears you with open ears, who sees you with kind eyes, who welcomes the you behind the years. That's enough to start healing the wound of invisibility. And sometimes that person might even be you. You see, the relationship you have with yourself sets the tone for every other connection in your life. So ask yourself, when was the last time you did something just because it brought you joy? Not out of obligation, not to please anyone else, but because it filled your soul? Maybe it's walking barefoot in the grass like you used to when you were a child. Maybe it's writing in a journal again, not because anyone will read it, but because your voice matters to you. Maybe it's reaching out to someone new, even if your hands feel a little shaky doing it. And if you're still hesitant, thinking it's too late to start over, too late to change the way things feel, I want to gently challenge that thought. Because you are not done becoming. There's no expiration date on discovery. No age limit on joy. No final curtain on connection. Let me tell you about a woman I once met at a community center. She was 83. Soft-spoken, slow-moving, always sat in the back. For years, she said nothing during group meetings. But one day, when the topic turned to stories from the past, she shared something so beautiful, so raw, that the entire room leaned in. She spoke of a heartbreak she had never told anyone, followed by a love that came decades later. A love that arrived quietly, without fanfare, but saved her life in small, quiet ways. After she spoke, something shifted. Not just in the room, but in her. She sat up straighter. She smiled more. And week after week, she began to show up not just physically, but fully. What changed? She allowed herself to be visible. Not because she demanded the spotlight, but because she shared something real, and people responded. That's the power of stepping into your story. Not the polished version, not the one that skips over pain, but the honest version. And when you do, something remarkable happens. Others feel safe to do the same. Your vulnerability becomes a bridge. Your presence becomes an invitation. So today, take a moment to notice yourself, to recognize the quiet strength it took to get here. Every wrinkle on your face is not just a mark of time. It's a record of laughter, of pain, of survival. Every line holds a piece of the journey. You are living history. You are still becoming. And if you still feel invisible, don't shrink away. Instead, plant your feet, lift your head, and remind yourself gently, I am still here. I am still learning. I am still worthy of being seen. Because the truth is, people who have lived long, who have loved deeply and lost deeply, who have tasted both joy and sorrow, those people shine differently. And their light isn't loud or flashy, but it's strong. It's steady. It warms every space it touches. You don't need to be what you once were to be whole now. You don't need to do what you once did to matter today. You are not your productivity. You are not your past roles. You are not the number of phone calls you receive or invitations you get. You are something far greater, something rooted and radiant. And this world, chaotic as it is, still needs you. Not a younger you, not a different version of you, just you, with your stories, your softness, your strength. So don't disappear quietly. Speak, laugh, create, connect, take up space. And if no one has told you this lately, you are seen. You are heard. You are deeply, wonderfully enough. If this video touched you in any way, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments. What part of your story have you reclaimed recently? What small moment reminded you that you do still matter? And if you found even a little light here, I hope you'll like this video, subscribe to the channel, and stay connected. Because here, You are not invisible. You are part of a community that sees you and walks beside you. Here's to living your most honest, joyful, connected life at any age. You are not fading. You are still shining.